Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I'm Sid Part 2. Joining me today is...
Steve Baxi.
Indeed, he is. And today we're here to talk about one of Steve's favorite things, which is, of course, streaming on Twitch. So anyway, Steve, you were talking...
Let's go! Twitch streamers. I actually do have a book on my to-read list about Twitch, so I wouldn't have been totally unprepared.
No, we're here to talk about streaming, the modern day cable, as it were. What it's done to the entertainment industry, what the pros and cons of it are, and just the whole thing. I guess it's just kind of been in my mind. I needed to pick something just quick off the cuff, so I was like, well, like everything's going on, talking about the Warner Brothers Netflix merger and yada yada yada, and I'm like, it's not great for industry, and there's like all these complexities to talk about, very few of them like in favor of streaming services, generally speaking, but I don't know, it's an interesting little world and topic of conversation, so I thought it'd be fun to get into. Steve, what are your general thoughts on streaming? Has it been just a complete net negative, or are there enough positives from like the streaming era to make it a more nuanced issue?
So it's one of those things where I think we've gotten so used to the concept of it that it's hard to explain to someone what the world before it was like, even though it's only been like, say, 15, 20 years, depending on how far back you want to go. I mean, Netflix was around since the 90s, but like streaming as we know it doesn't exist until like 2007, 2008 era. So it's one of those things where like, if you were trying to tell someone who'd always experienced streaming, who was always able to rent movies online, who always understood how to use different players and stuff, and you didn't have to, and they didn't go through this notion of like, what's bandwidth and what's the number of downloads you can have in a year or something like that, then it sounds insane to say that this is anything but a norm, and it's a norm with pros and cons. But given that we've both lived through a world before streaming and after streaming, the older I get and the more stuff I learn and the more stuff that happens, the more I'm just kind of on the team of streaming was a bad idea. It continues to be a bad idea. Every pro that it claimed to deliver either didn't come true, was outright a lie, or went in the exact opposite direction. And it becomes really telling when you unpack what a lot of these streaming companies said that their mission was, and what the experience of watching stuff on a streaming service has done to just the experience of watching in general. I'm sure we'll get into it, but the history of Netflix's founding and the story that the CEO said that inspired it versus what actually happened is really telling in this way. But then also on the wider spectrum of, right now we're in a moment where everything is awful because of a handful of tech billionaires. And it should not go unsaid that streaming companies are not Hollywood studios. They're not studios first and foremost, they are tech companies. And everything that they do is in service to being a tech company first. And the way that they exercise their side of the tech industry is by being a streamer. But everything that they care about, there is functionally in both a social impact and in their goals, no difference between a Netflix and an Uber.
I would tend to agree with a lot of what you're saying. It's funny that you talk about like it's so hard to explain, what the world was like before streaming to someone that never experienced it. Because I had that experience just last week or just the other week because family and I went on vacation. We were in a hotel, and the hotel had cable, so I put on a movie for Leah to watch one night to unwind, and it was Princess Bride, and we got through, I don't know, a good chunk of it, but it was time to go to sleep, so it's like, okay, time to turn off the movie and go to bed. And the next night she's like, can we finish Princess Bride? I'm like, no. It's no, you can't, because it's old people TV. You don't have the ability to just pop back in exactly where you were and find it again. If it was on and now it's not anymore, and they're not going to play the exact same movie the very next night on like a schedule like that, right? So no, we just can't finish it right now. Like I got it at home. We can go home and watch it after the vacation, but not right now. And she just 2 or 3 times I had to explain that exact thing to her because she just can't. Like I literally said, it's old people TV. The old people TV doesn't work that way. So
that's hilarious.
Yeah. So like that in and of itself, I is kind of why I think I'm a little bit more on the fence of it, just from not talking about like how it's used on an industry level, but like just speaking of it from a personal convenience side of things. I'm a big fan of that. I think that was like, and I think everyone could speak to this, that like that was the instant appeal of streaming. I mean, you and I are from the same generation. We were used to pirating things, and so that would
Hell
be,
yeah, dude.
yeah, LimeWire and uTorrent and Pirate Bay, yada yada.
The seven
that-
C's.
Yeah, and then when we got a little bit lazier in the 2010s, you had like Mega Upload, and those were like great sometimes, but I feel like everyone had the experience of downloading a thing, and because you couldn't tell until it was finished downloading, you just got the wrong thing. That's how Soulja Boy got so big, is he just kept listing his song on LimeWire as a bunch of other popular songs. Just to trick people into downloading and listening to his song in '08. So you had instances like that where you just downloaded something but it wasn't what you actually wanted. You had instances where, like, sure, for the newest, hottest movie that just dropped on DVD or Blu-ray, it was easy to find a source, or find like 5 different sources and download one of them from uTorrent. But then you had just like, I want to watch this obscure movie from 1978. Well, there's one person hosting it. And, so you can download it while they're on their computer and no other time. So you compare like the cable experience, and then you compare the initial pirating experience, and it's gotten more complex like that. There's streaming sites that are basically just pirate sites too. But again, those have their own host of issues. So like, just as a user of the service, I think that streaming has a lot of like just really great utility built into it, to the point where, okay, you have the app, you can just open it, log in, and watch whatever you wanted wherever you were at. And like when we go back to early 2010s Netflix, when they were the only real streaming service and they just fucking had everything and it was cheap as dirt, that was great. But at what cost is where kind of all that leads to. So I don't know. I real quick, I'll just finish my point. I'm of two minds about it, because I do enjoy the convenience in a streaming service, but things have gotten a lot muddier since then, and it's become a lot less convenient, honestly, than it used to be.
For sure. And the other thing to mention with the nuance there is the convenience makes sense assuming that it works the way you intend it to, which what I think a lot of people take for granted is that the kinds of mistakes or errors or problems you'd have in torrenting, they do actually still exist all the time when it comes to streaming. So one of the things that would happen back in the day when you torrent something is you torrent it and the subtitles are wrong,
Mm.
or they're not complete subtitles, or there are errors in the version that you downloaded. Maybe you were one of those insane people that thought, oh boy, I can't fucking wait for X-Men Origins Wolverine, and you download the work print of it for some reason,
Yep.
just to, I guess, to see an unfinished movie. But the thing that people don't realize is that the idea of streaming a movie and streaming it beyond just the country that made it or the country that has the rights to it means that those kinds of mistakes are amplified and are extremely common. So, for example, if you try to watch John Wick, if you have the Blu-ray, if you saw it in theaters, uh, the movie's got these stylized subtitles where people will speak Russian and these big neon letters will come up on screen and they'll have slow fades and ellipses and stuff to kind of give dramatic effect and cadence to what people are saying. Because they are subtitles and you're watching the movie presumably in English, those subtitles are not hard coded to to the film file. They have to be recoded in every single language that you watch it in. So when you go to a streamer, 9 times out of 10, the streamer who's hosting the movie, whether it's Netflix, Paramount, Peacock, Amazon Prime, they do not go through the trouble of coding the subtitles with the language you're watching it in. So if you watch John Wick on Peacock, the subtitles for those sections that are stylized are just not there. They
Mm.
don't exist. It over the Christmas weekend, I've been going through and watching all of Clint Eastwood's movies, and I got to Letters from Iwo Jima, which is the companion piece to Flags of Our Fathers, where Flags of Our Fathers is a World War II movie about the American soldiers who fought in Iwo Jima, and then Letters from Iwo Jima is about the Japanese soldiers. And so, presumably, if you know that going in, you'd understand that from Iwo Jima is a movie in Japanese. The Amazon Prime rental for the movie, the one that you pay for, has the movie dubbed. And I reached out to Amazon customer service, and no matter what you did, you could not undub it because that's just the file they had. It was impossible to undub it, even though
Wild.
you're paying for it. So at that point, you're like, well, shit, I should have just bought the DVD or something. Um, so those are the kind of common things that you run into where, like, if the idea is I want unlimited access to movies at my discretion where I can download them via torrent or stream them, one's less convenient because I have to wait an hour, one's more convenient because I pay $5. The quality control, shockingly, is about on par with each other. So it raises this question of, like, if the idea of streaming is that it's more convenient, is it actually? Because when you get that situation where you try to watch a movie that's supposed to have subtitled segments and they're just not there, what do you do?
Sit and cry about your wasted $5 that Amazon will never give you back.
Surprisingly, they did give me my $5 back, so that's
Oh,
good.
good for you.
I got my $5 back.
I'm surprised you didn't have to claw your $5 back from Jeff Bezos's cold dead hands. Um,
It's not great. It's not great, but yeah. I mean, that's the thing where, like, you have that experience and you start watching it and you're just like, well, shit, I paid for this and it still didn't work out.
yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of like just things that don't feel very convenient. My God, the amount of steps you have to go through to like sign into an account anymore is just intolerable. Um, it's gotten like infuriating, and they claim it's for like user security, but just don't bullshit me. You're selling this information. Just fucking tell me. Um, so like there's that, and I mean again, it's not like that wasn't to some level a concern with pirating. I certainly fucked up my family computer with LimeWire back in the day, and I'm sure I didn't do my college computer any credit, any favors when I was using uTorrent. And then like the fucking streaming sites on available nowadays are just literally broken. You know, you go into like fucking whatever it is, 1, 2, 3 movies or just stream or whatever, and it's got a billion like deceptive play buttons or download ads that are just actually to download something else. So it's all kind of fucked. And at least the streaming services, Netflix, Amazon, are less like sketchy as fuck as to what you're going to be getting when you actually buy those things. So I would agree that there's, you know, a lot of the instances of what you were kind of afraid of with pirating do kind of find their own ways to crop up because of just these are companies just trying to make a profit. They actually do not care about the like art form, which I don't know if you could say that a company like Blockbuster ever really cared about the art of film and cinema, but like certainly mom and pop shops would put more care into like their tapes that they were renting out and stuff, and the quality of those.
That's a good segue too, because I think the other thing that really becomes a problem with streaming is human curation versus algorithmic curation. When people remember going to Blockbuster, they remember going and renting videos, but what they don't remember often is like Blockbuster would have 8,000 copies of the same movie and no copies of the one movie you actually want to watch, because Blockbuster at the end of the day was also a franchise, and it would just make sure that it had a million copies of whatever big release came out that week, but its backlog usually wasn't particularly great. And what you're saying about like the mom and pop video stores, those are the real ones where people would go in and be like, oh, here's a unique find, or here's something that's curated by the person who owns the store. Kind of like what we were talking about with comic stores last week, where like the store takes on the personality of the owner instead of being a faceless franchise. And with things like Netflix or Amazon Prime or Paramount or whatever, uh, the catalog's determined by the algorithm, and certain things are pushed to the top or pushed to the bottom based on that. Uh, Netflix has never, and seems like it never will, advertise its movies. So you don't see a bunch of TV commercials for these things. You might get like YouTube ads or something like that, or like a reel on YouTube or a TikTok or something. But Netflix does not care about advertising. They don't want their movies to be in theaters. You don't get to see the trailers in theaters. None of that. So the way a movie like lives and dies on Netflix is it's just either going to be at the top when you open the screen, or it's not there, or it gets buried completely and you never see it again. And after the various other movie companies like Warner Brothers and Disney and all of them started getting their own streaming services and taking control of their own catalog, like Warner Brothers and Disney and with HBO and Disney Plus and all that, we thought that that problem would subside a little bit. We're like, okay, if I'm going to HBO Max, I'm just getting access to everything Warner Brothers has ever put out. But very quickly, you realize that's not true either. Looney Tunes gets taken off of HBO Max on a regular basis. Batman the Animated Series gets taken off there on a regular basis. There are dozens, if not hundreds, of movies that are Netflix originals. Movies that Netflix commissioned, produced, paid for, released, that have no physical media release, that are not available on Netflix anymore because Netflix just took them down.
What was the Disney show with what's his name from Star Wars? The little person from Star Wars who played one of the Ewoks, Warwick Davis. He had a Disney, like an entire series for Disney that was up for like I want to say less than a week, and then Disney just decided to pull the whole thing. So you can only get it off pirating sites now. To your Netflix point, they'd made all these original series in collaboration with DreamWorks. The biggest one probably being She-Ra by Noel Stevenson or Noel Stevenson, and that that deal, that contract is up, and so all of those shows are leaving streaming. No idea if they're ever going to be physically released. And so it was funny because now you're starting to see creators talk about this stuff on their like personal social medias, and they're so pissed off about it. They're just telling people, "Yeah, go pirate my show. I don't give a fuck." Because I'm never working with this company again, so go ahead and pirate it. Because it's just so fucked up to just remove the thing and never release it physically, and that's what the Shira team is basically committing to. It's like, no, we worked really hard in the show, we were really really proud of it, and it never occurred to us, it was never brought up that it just might not ever exist again, and people just might not ever be able to watch it because of like a contract termination. But at the same time, it kind of makes sense that some of these contracts shouldn't just go in perpetuity, but that doesn't mean that just removing it and never releasing it physically is okay either.
Well, and that's the thing is like whenever you're renting anything that's digital, whether it's a video game or a movie or whatever, you're not actually buying the thing. You're buying a license to play the thing for however long the platform you're using maintains control of the license. Um, for
The
years and
big
years and
phrase
years.
that's gotten popular is if buying isn't owning, then pirating isn't stealing.
Right,
um,
exactly. Yeah, so like years and years and years ago, I bought a digital copy of A Few Good Men because it's one of my favorite movies. I watch it all the time, and I just have it on standby on like YouTube so I can watch it whenever. But if at any point YouTube and whoever fucking owns the rights to that movie have a falling out or the license isn't there, it doesn't matter that I paid $20 for it. It's gonna go away because that's how these things work. And that would be all well and good if number one, the people who made these things had any sort of control over the rights of those things when they leave the services, which they usually don't. And number two, if they ever got physical media releases, which they very rarely do. So, for example, there's a Netflix original movie from 2016 called Hush by Mike Flanagan. It's a really good horror movie. It's about a woman who's stuck in a cabin on her own. She lives by herself and she's deaf. And a guy comes to her house, a serial killer style, to kill her, and she can't hear him. So, like, literally, it's just like a cat and mouse game with a deaf woman, and it's awesome. It didn't
it's like
get
that one
a
Audrey
physical.
Hepburn movie.
Yeah. So Mike Flanagan has been pushing Netflix for years and years and years to get a physical release of that movie when it would periodically leave Netflix and get put back on Netflix, and it didn't happen until 2024, almost 10 years later. And that's just a common theme with a lot of this stuff where Netflix has spent billions and billions of dollars on its original programming, but you dig into those numbers and you dig into the history of why they do that. Uh, and at the end of the day, it's not because they want to make a platform where they can give millions of dollars to indie creators to make what they want. It's so that they can use them as advertising to get people to subscribe and then just remove the thing from their streaming service. And then what they can do when things are waning or when a holiday comes over or when an anniversary happens is that they can leverage the return of that thing to a streaming platform that's not available anywhere else as a reason for people to subscribe again.
And it's an incredibly hostile thing, and I think you really like uh, hit the nail on the head earlier when you talked about these companies are not, entertainment or media or art obsessed companies. They are tech companies, because that is a particularly pervasive strategy that feels like is a not unique innovation of the tech companies, but like they've certainly perfected it in a way that I don't think other major industries have been able to like capitalize on as well, or just do as insidiously. And I think it's probably because, like, to their credit, they offer a service that is stupidly cheap. And this is, I think, a good transition point to talk about one of the like biggest ethical concerns with the streaming services is the deal is too good, and because of that, it's become invasive. The like again, I talked about it earlier. The original plan for the full streaming service of Netflix was $7.99 a month. because that's where I signed up for it at, and I was like, oh man, there's just so much stuff on here. If I just watch like 2 movies, it's paid for itself. And we all certainly watched more than 2 movies in those days. That was when binging was a thing. Binging like started being a thing. It's never gone away, but it's certainly fallen off. But like it just was such a good deal, and it took a long time, I think, for people to really comprehend why it was such a good deal, and it was because the streaming rights were not the same for a show as like TV rerun rights, or the like rights for a movie for like broadcast. The streaming rights, because they got in so early, and they to their credit, they invented a methodology of watching things, so they were able to kind of set the price at just bottom of the barrel, and a bunch of these companies were like, great, we can unload this stuff that's literally making us no money, at least it can produce a couple dollars for us, before it made Netflix just absolutely massive, and then everybody started getting in on it, because for whatever reason the streaming contracts remained just in the absolute basement. And I'm not sure why the media companies played this game that was so stupid, because they owned all the media. Netflix was just a broadcaster, essentially. And then they, instead of just raising the cost, which I'm sure they did, but not to anywhere near enough of a degree, instead of just raising the cost and renegotiating the contracts for streaming rights, they just kept the streaming rights at the bottom of the barrel, but then made their own streaming services, which, at least in the early days, just sucked balls compared to Netflix. I mean, like, HBO has gone through a number of evolutions just to end up back at HBO Max again, but, like, I remember it was while, I want to say season 8 of Game of Thrones was going, that like they started HBO Go, and I remember like sitting there talking about it, because I was wanting to watch Game of Thrones. I was like, well, I'll sign up for HBO Go, because it is kind of exhausting to pirate stuff sometimes. There's lots of hoops to jump through and lots of shit to deal with. So I signed up for HBO Go the night of the like season premiere of Game of Thrones, and the fucking bandwidth was so shit. Like, you couldn't stream on it. It just wouldn't play. Like, we couldn't even get through the fucking dun 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 of the episode. It was so garbage. And like HBO got better over time, but like Jesus Christ, it was just so trash. But all these companies just fucking race to the bottom of the barrel of trying to get their own streaming service going, and none of them fucking worked for shit at first compared to Netflix. Instead of just beating Netflix to the punch and saying, okay, good luck doing a fully original catalog, we're gonna keep our stuff, or we're gonna jack up our rates instead of creating trying to copy your business model, which would have been the thing that made sense. And God forbid you can spread some of that money to your actors, writers.
Yeah, and I mean we entered the streaming age with Netflix having this conversation with the 2007 writers' strike. When that happened, there was a lot of issues, but one of the ones at the tail end of it was, what are we going to do about residuals for new media, or for, at that point, basically just Netflix? And then when the latest strike happened in 2023, it piggybacked off of the consequences of that initial strike, where the deal that they agreed to in 2007 2008, everyone at that point in all of the writers guilds and directors guilds accepted that streaming was going to get bigger. They all knew that eventually everyone was going to go down that path, but the speed at which the studios would try to accelerate that process wasn't really dawning on anyone. And like you said, the early attempts at doing it were so bad that it seemed like things like reality TV, sports, game shows, the things that kind of are the bread and butter, daytime soap operas, the things that are like the bread and butter of like working Hollywood actors and directors and writers, seemed like those things were not going to get touched at that point. And then flash forward like 15 years later, and you realize that the next writer's strike and DGA strike and actors strike was in twofold about the emerging threat of AI, and then also the devil that you let in of the streamers, and the fact that no one is privy to how these streamers are counting views or their numbers. No one's getting residuals for anything. The idea that broadcast rights would just evaporate, that physical media releases would just evaporate. These things that people count on as part of their paycheck, as part of the thing contributing to their whether or not they have health care from the Writers Guild, all of these things would just overnight kind of go away. And one of the things that's terrible about this, when the other studios started pulling their content to their own platforms, is in doing that they've essentially siloed off the possibility that this thing could be licensed elsewhere and allow the people who made it to make any money off of it. Netflix is pretty infamous for, after the writer's strike, one of the concessions they made is like any other studio production, Netflix had to hire based on the rules of the Actors Guild, the Directors Guild, and the Screenwriters Guild, and they agreed to do that. But the reason so many Netflix shows get canceled so early, whether it's 2 seasons, 3 seasons, or 4 seasons, is because they're always canceling them right as time comes to renegotiate the initial contract for the staff of the show. So after 3 years, if you're supposed to get a raise, because that's how TV works, we'll just cancel your show at 3 years, so we don't have to have that conversation. And again, that's a thing where like that sort of predatory behavior by a streaming platform, it wasn't something anyone anticipated. And even if you did, you might think, okay, this is fine. I'm the star of a big Netflix show. I'm going to get really, really famous and go on to make movies and stuff. I can afford to kind of slum it here for a minute, not get paid very much, and then go on to bigger and better things. But as the last 15 years have shown, Netflix stuff just fades from memory because they pour out so much of it. Netflix actors, directors, writers, they don't tend to go very far because people forget that they exist. If anything, Netflix started courting established writers and directors and actors to lend legitimacy to the things that they're doing. The people that could already afford this. The idea that you could be a TV star, break out from that role and go into a movie, basically failed on the Netflix model, and the reverse had to happen, where you had to already be famous in order to lend credibility to a Netflix project. And the second you did that, there was no guarantee or commitment that the thing that you lent your credibility to was going to be given a theatrical release, was going to be advertised, that you were going to get anything for it, that it was going to allow other actors to join you or give you creative control. David Fincher signed that big exclusive deal with Netflix, and they touted House of Cards as an early original series where the first
Mm-hmm.
couple episodes were directed by David Fincher. And he's made movies in the interim, but a lot of David Fincher's creative output's kind of been maligned since then. I think The Killer is a really good movie, and I like Mank for what it's worth. But like the fact that they were not The Killer was only released like limited, but the fact that they weren't released in theaters, that they don't have physical media releases, people forget they exist, right? Like it's completely gone. The fact that David Fincher can afford a movie of his to be erased from consciousness is not the situation most people who sign on to these projects have. I mean, like look at Stranger Things. Everyone was in love with Stranger Things. Every time a season drops, it just ended. It's about to fade from memory. Can you name like 2 projects that Millie Bobby Brown or David Harbour have done outside of Stranger Things? Like
I
Violet
can give
Night?
you. Yeah, I was gonna say I can give you Violet Night, and that's about
Yeah,
it. Um,
right. Like I can get like Violet Night. Like I guess I think one of them was in the new Twisters movie or something. But like what? Like with the exception of like HBO Max originals, and because HBO is its own thing, and that's sort of a separate conversation. It's really rare that the kinds of prominence and money you'd get promised for doing a TV show exists because of Netflix. And then on the other end of it, because Netflix was not giving anybody their viewership information, and because the way they calculate their viewership is essentially meaningless, there's no way to quantify that in terms of like, well, how much should I get paid for it? Um, the problem with Netflix's viewership calculation is that what it's doing is it's taking the amount of time that something has been streamed in total, however many minutes it's ran for, and then dividing it by the runtime to assess how many people have watched it. So what that means is if I watch 30 minutes of a 90-minute movie and turn it off, and you watch 60 minutes of a 90-minute movie and turn it off, we have both watched one movie. That is one view that has been counted. So at the end of the day, that's kind of a meaningless number because I never finished the movie. You never finished the movie. How can you say anybody watched the movie at that point? And because Netflix counts on people to just let things autoplay at the end of anything, there are plenty of things that I have started for 30 seconds because I forgot to turn off the autoplay when I went to the bathroom. And now suddenly that's being added as part of the number that they're using to say this thing was being watched.
Man, it's wild. It's just...
It's so dumb.
And I've been like, there's also just the fact that like no streaming service has yet turned a profit a single time.
Yeah.
And again, part of that's just, oh well, we're gonna lose money to, you know, disrupt the pre-existing corporations, but then we'll jack up the prices once those corporations no longer exist, or those methods no longer exist. And that was their pitch to investors to invest in their company, which, like, I don't know, man. This is why I think just the idea of investment is just a fucking Ponzi scheme to begin with. Because that sounds like a terrible investment to me. And yet it made so many people, presumably someone made money off of it. I don't know.
It made a lot of people hypothetically rich, which is richer than we are.
Yeah. I just... like every time I like really think about like stocks and stuff, I just go, so it's just pretend, right? And like I had this conversation because a couple months back Haley had COVID, so we went to my mom's, me and the girls, so she could have just the house to herself and stuff. And sitting there talking to my mom about like investments, she goes, but it's not pretend, it's real money. I'm like, for now, until you know, imagine losing some of it that you never actually had. Like, it's just all bullshit. And it makes me so nervous. Like, how could you put your entire life into just pretend money? You don't make anything. You don't do anything with it. You're just printing. You're plugging in a machine that creates pollution and prints money. I don't know what we're doing here, guys.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of the people, this goes back to the point that we opened with, of that these are just tech companies. A lot of people start these streaming services or become part of streaming companies because they see it as a good startup for venture capital funding, and then they don't care about it. There was an article last week, the week before, about Mubi. If you haven't used Mubi, it's basically just like a streaming service for indie movies, essentially. But a few months ago, there was a big investment into Mubi from Sequoia Capital, which is one of those right-wing venture capital firms. It's founded by one of those PayPal mafia, Elon Musk, Peter Thiel guys. They do a lot of business with Israel, yada, yada, yada. Because
Steve, I already hate them. You can stop.
I know, right? So, because Mubi was geared towards art house people who liked independent films, there was already kind of a community who supported it because it seemed to them like a brand, quote unquote, or a platform, quote unquote, that cared more about the creators, that was more politically left wing, yada, yada, yada. And when the Sequoia Capital news broke, a lot of people were really angry about it. Thousands of people canceled their subscriptions in protest. It became this huge black stain on Mubi's reputation as a brand. But they didn't denounce the capital. They didn't denounce the money. They didn't care about that. And guess what? It's because the founder of Mubi doesn't like movies. He doesn't care about movies. He said as much. He got the idea for it because one day he really wanted to watch Wong Kar-wai's In the Mood for Love, and he couldn't find it online. And he found a business model where he could pay independent filmmakers and Criterion and foreign film people basically 10 times less than what you would have to get a blockbuster movie streaming on Mubi because they're so low budget to begin with, and created a business model where he could have a rotation of small indie movies and build up a platform for a cheap amount of money that could then attract venture capital funding and eventually have an initial public offering and make him billions of dollars. But he didn't do it because he liked movies. We just kind of projected that onto him.
I mean, I'll give him this. He at least had an interesting and unique taste, which is probably better than most other tech bros you can
Right.
name.
Yeah, I mean, like, In the Mood for Love is a good movie, so I can't blame him for wanting to watch that at some point. But this, to kind of connect the dots there too, this is a thing where, like, so many of these streaming services, whether it's Amazon, Paramount, Netflix, Hulu, Mubi, Tubi, whatever, because these are all tech companies, they all have tech CEOs. They're all in it for the venture capital funding. And if you know anything about startups and the history of startup culture, there is kind of an aesthetic to it. There is kind of a performance of like how you should sell this idea that you started it up. Because Bill Gates founded Microsoft in a garage, this sort of becomes a founding myth to the point where Jeff Bezos, who worked on in a venture capital firm, who was on Wall Street, made a lot of money, I think, as like an investment banker. When he founded Amazon, he was already rich, but he bought a house with a garage so that he could say he founded Amazon in a house with a garage, like Bill Gates did Microsoft, because they understand that they're playing to this myth, whether or not it's true. And Netflix is another one of those where everyone's heard the story of why Netflix was founded, but the story is complete bullshit. So there's a book from a few years ago called Netflix's Speculative Fictions. And it's a really short book that takes all of Netflix's internal documents that have been released publicly and compiles them into a narrative and essentially explains, like, this is the story of how Netflix tells its story to its investors year over year over year. And you can find in that a lot of times where they lied, a lot of times where the story changes, and a lot of the people who have since left Netflix have talked about this in more detail. There's another article that sort of connects this too, from the same guy who wrote the Mubi article about the founding of Netflix. And essentially the story goes that the guy who founded Netflix rented Apollo 13 from Blockbuster, forgot about it, found the tape, went to Blockbuster, and was aghast that he had to pay $40 in late fees. And he's like, this is bullshit. I should be able to rent a movie and not pay this late fee. So he came up with the idea of Netflix mailing you discs and having no late fees. Thing is, that's not true. That's not actually what happened. Netflix has been around since the 90s. Netflix mailing discs and doing rentals has been around a really long time. It had nothing to do with Blockbuster, to the point where Blockbuster eventually heard that story so many times, they sent out a press release saying, hey, we've searched our databases. We have no record of this transaction ever happening. Stop saying it. So the Netflix business model, essentially, the reason it exists the way it does, the reason there are no late fees, is because Netflix had a warehouse problem. To its credit, like you were saying earlier, Netflix had a really good catalog initially. That's since become worse since it became a streamer. But back when you could rent DVDs, they had millions of movies. Any movie you could name was basically on Netflix. Any TV show you could name was on Netflix. You could get anything you wanted. But because they had such a big library, they had an overstuffed warehouse. So they came up with the idea of no late fees because they would hope that users of Netflix would just hold on to the discs as long as possible and become de facto warehouses until they needed to trade them out for other discs. So in that article about Netflix's founding, there's a really good line about it where the writer says, Blockbuster penalized you for being forgetful. Netflix counted on you being mindless. And if you think about that to its logical conclusion, and you connect that to the way Netflix is always auto-playing, the way that Netflix is always dumping content out there over and over again, the way that Netflix has devalued the art form of movie making to the point where movies don't look or sound as good as they used to, in part because of streamers. There is a lot of truth to that. Netflix does kind of count on its user base to be mindless, and it's always wanted that.
It is actively, crazy because when Netflix launched original content, the first show that they did was House of Cards, and this was before everyone knew everything about Kevin Spacey except apparently Seth MacFarlane. Brief aside, it always drives me crazy when people go, "Oh, Simpsons did it," or "Oh, the Simpsons predicted this," or Family Guy predicted this, because they showed this clip of Stewie running naked through the mall going, "I just escaped from Kevin Spacey's house." And everyone's like, see, Family Guy knew all these years ago. They tried to tell us. I'm like, okay, but did Seth MacFarlane go to, the police and tell people? Or was he just making a fucking joke? Because if he was just making a fucking joke, then yeah, it's a weird moment that happened to work out. But if he knew, then making a joke on his fucking TV show is the worst possible way to tell everyone Seth MacFarlane's a monster.
I mean, you're right.
So anyway, but when House of Cards launched, Kevin Spacey, that was a big name. Kevin Spacey was one of the method acting darlings and stuff. He was kind of
I
out
think
there.
he won an Oscar at that point too. He was a big name actor.
Yeah, no, he was huge, and to the point where it was a big deal that once the news about Kevin Spacey broke and he got canceled, it was a big part of people's reactions was, well, what's going to happen to the future of House of Cards? And it was a good show, right? It launched strong. It launched as a good show, and then right in the follow up of that, they did Grace and Frankie. I think was their next big one, and that had Jane Fonda and Martin Sheen in it, and a bunch of other pretty decent named actors that just were too old to star as leading characters anymore. So they made a show about old people to cast old people in. And that was, not as engaging maybe, but it was still well done. It was well written and stuff. And these series kept coming out, and they initially pitched themselves that they're going to be prestige series in the same vein as an HBO or whatever. And then just along the way, it kind of took a dive, and they still have something come out every now and again that captures the public imagination and gets big. I think the latest one was Wednesday, and then they also had Squid Games a couple years ago. But by and large, a new Netflix show drops, and it's getting more and more rare for one of those things to capture much attention for more than a week. But because everyone that really cares streams the whole thing in one night, some crazy person that stays up till 3 a.m. watching Daredevil.
I wonder who could have ever done that.
Yeah,
who would have ever done it twice?
What a fucking idiot. But they, these new shows keep dropping. It still cracks me up with the Marvel shows. The fact that the Marvel shows all came out and they had their little era, and then they kind of fell off, and it was oh, Daredevil was in No Way Home, which means the Netflix shows are canon. I'm wasn't that the whole point, that they were canon? What do you mean now they're canon? That was half their marketing. The other half was it's on Netflix.
There's a whole line in one of the first 2 or 3 episodes of Daredevil about the Shatari invasion from Avengers. It was always meant to be canon. I think
it was more that the fact that the movies never. I think it was the fact that the movies never acknowledged them, so it didn't feel properly canon. But that's neither here nor there. No, but just over time, it's used to be every new Netflix show was really popping off, and it would just capture the internet by storm. When an old show came to Netflix, everyone would be talking about it, and it would be like in the public zeitgeist again. And that's just not happening with the same level of frequency it used to.
Well,
Like
and
Wednesday got big, but then it took them like 3 years to make another season of Wednesday, and the response wasn't there. Sandman got big, and then Neil Gaiman got out as the worst person ever. And then they did the second season of Sandman, and no one wants to watch that now.
well, and
um,
there's a lot of reasons for that Netflix essentially just did it to themselves. And this isn't just a Netflix thing. This is also every other streamer that copied the formula thing. But Netflix is kind of the culprit here, where they popularized that model where every episode of a season would drop at the same time.
mhm.
So in essence, if a season of television was out there and you watched it in a couple of days, you could have a couple of days of conversation. But at a certain point, it just fades from the popular consciousness because there was no sort of stringing it along over the course of a week. There's nothing to sustain engagement with it. And when Netflix was pouring out like one or two original series a year, that's one thing because those could still be considered events like a movie. When they started pumping out several on a regular basis and the art turned into content, where it became about packaging these things so that they can be delivered in a regular interval instead of something that was intentional, the whole thing got devalued and you would just forget that it existed to the point where even Netflix and a lot of the other streamers have now moved away from that.
Mhm.
HBO's The Pit releases one episode a week. Andor released one episode a week. Netflix decided to start breaking up the seasons into multiple parts so that you get 5 episode chunks because they realized that this model wasn't working. The other problem with it is exactly what you said about the time between seasons. And something that you hear a lot of people in the movie industry and in the TV industry talk about is the rise of prestige television. Sounds like this great creator driven thing where like you get a director and they get like 13 hours to tell their story. But in practice, what that means is the people who are working on the show, the lighting crew, the cast and crew, the makeup people, all of these people have signed up for 3 months to half a year working on this one thing when they are paid for it initially a very low amount of money for contracts that will not be renegotiated because the show will be canceled. And by the time they get to the end of the season, they either are broke because they don't have any money from taking any other jobs because they've been siloed out from this, or they can't come back and they have to abandon the show entirely because they took more consistent jobs elsewhere. So, like the idea that it would take 3 years between seasons of Wednesday, part of the problem with that is everyone who was responsible for doing Wednesday essentially had to devote their entire lives to making an entire season of television instead of having and being able to take other jobs and then being able to schedule and do it again at some point. And because the shows aren't renewed very quickly, because Netflix cares so much about the viewership numbers during the first release weekend, because so much of that is dictated by whether or not the algorithm supports the show or doesn't support the show, those jobs are really precarious. And the stories you hear from the people that work on those shows, they don't get paid very well. It's not a particularly good experience. And the idea that there are these 13-hour movies being released, maybe that was true for like the first season of House of Cards or Orange is the New Black or Daredevil or whatever, but very quickly down the line you realize that that's not a thing
God,
anymore.
Orange is
And
the New Black.
because Netflix's executives are always giving show notes where they want characters to announce what they're saying because they're counting on people to being on their phones not paying attention, because they want these things to be easily digestible. There's so much of the production side of it, like the way the shows look, the way they're lit, the way the audio is mixed, that are all cutting corners, that are all making it look worse, where it's one of the it becomes this product where like even if you enjoyed the first season of, say, House of Cards, and you enjoyed the second season of House of Cards, the sustainability of that, because it's not done like a regular TV show, is just simply not there. And you see that in a lot of Netflix shows that survive past season 2 or 3. They get markedly worse every time.
Hmm. They do, and you made the point about they know that people are going to be on their phones, so like they intentionally try to make the shows just a little bit boring because again
Hmm.
it keeps you disengaged, not enough to turn it off but just enough to like not pay attention super hard to what you're watching. And that I think is like of everything they've done, I think that's my biggest problem with them.
Yeah.
Like that's it's not wholly original to Netflix. I think the other streamers have picked up on it, but I think that like they might just be doing it because Netflix has made it the standard and they don't truly realize what they're doing, but Netflix does. That
Yeah.
might be uh, attributing more malice to Netflix or not enough malice to the other companies, but I don't know because like I remember when DC launched its original streaming service that lasted for like a year before it just all got folded into HBO. Um,
It had comics too, right? That was the
yeah,
same service?
yeah, it was comics and original shows and just DC cartoons and stuff, which I was
I
like,
remember
dope,
that.
let's go for that. And their like big original program thing was gonna be or was Doom Patrol, and like I remember watching Doom Patrol and like that shit was good. Like
Yeah.
that was
Doom Patrol was really good.
that was incredibly engaging television that like felt that it kind of earned this weird streaming service kind of thing. Alan Tudyk was amazing. But like and Timothy Dalton, that was a fucking great show. Matt Boomer, just go watch Doom Patrol. That's the moral of this episode. But like that one launched, that had good programming. Disney Plus launched, and like it didn't have anything original to it streaming initially. It started to with the Marvel shows, but that was like its own fucking hot mess of garbage that I don't think you could attribute to the same thing of it's intentionally boring. I think it was just mostly bad. Um,
Yeah.
because like those were all like very clearly. I think we're past this era. I think they've kind of learned their lesson. Those are of that brief era where they just were turning everything into a streaming show that they had sitting around as pitches for movies. That's like why Boba Fett sucked balls. Um,
Yeah.
because it just was clearly a 2-hour movie that they turned into a 6-hour show. Um,
Yeah, I mean, Obi-Wan's the same way, Boba Fett,
yeah,
the Ahsoka show.
yeah. So like, I think we're mostly getting past that. I think most of these streamers have kind of learned their lesson about not just rushing to make content for that because they all kind of fell flat on their face with it. They didn't make a single dime off of it. Um, but like Netflix feels particularly like gross, I guess is just the word I'm going to use, of intentionally trying to just keep you like partially keep you edged, keep you just kind of engaged, but not fully invested, not like really taking the plunge, because it tricks you into just staying on there. Um, and that's like just the most insidious and like what I think of as just the biggest problem with it. Like lots of other people talk about, oh, we've gotten rid of cable and we replaced it with streaming services that are more expensive. I'm like, unless you're an idiot like Steve Baxi and download every streaming service, it's not more expensive than cable. You get the ones you actually give a fuck about and will actually
Well,
use.
so here's the thing about that. Um, the way cable and streaming sort of differentiated for a little while was there was certain live programming, and you mentioned this earlier, that you just couldn't have on streaming. And so cable became the home for those kinds of things, where like the Super Bowl or basketball and football seasons in general, college sports, like because streaming had all the original content and cable had all of the live content that you would normally watch, game shows, the news, all those things. There was sort of a clear line in the sand of like, well, I don't really like sports. I don't watch the news. I can just have a streamer. Or I don't really stream movies, but I do like watching football, so I'll just pay for cable. And you could, in one sense, kind of make that argument. Over the years, though, this has become not true, and it's gotten to the point now where if you want to watch the NFL, I'm not talking about having the season ticket and giving access to every single game every single week. I'm just saying if you want to watch the 17 games that are broadcast in your area over the period of 18 weeks, you need to have cable, Netflix, Amazon Prime, and possibly Paramount Plus or Peacock.
Jesus fucking
Because
Christ.
because certain games are now streaming exclusives. The Christmas games the last 2 years have been on Netflix. Thursday Night Football is now on Amazon Prime. If you don't have a Fox affiliate or a CBS affiliate in your local area, then you need something like Paramount Plus or Fox Sports. So the streamers and the cable companies are kind of at war with each other, and they always have been, but they found a way to hold hands when it comes to things like that. And so suddenly these two things are not two options. They just kind of load you in on the same problem, and you end up paying for both no matter what. Even if you try to do like one of those digital streaming cable replacements like Fubo TV or YouTube TV or Sling TV, you still have the same problem. You're still paying the amount of money for a streaming service that is what you would pay for cable, and it would still not get you everything that you need because you need the other streaming service for the rest of the fucking games.
That's beautiful.
It's
And
so
frankly,
bad.
I think sports people deserve it. I think that's what you get for liking sports.
It's rough, and I mean the same problems persist of like who's getting paid for this, what about all these gambling apps that are now advertising on them, what about the
Oh,
way that
Jesus
like
Christ.
yeah, like there's just so many layers of that. And I think the point that you mentioned earlier about that sort of insidious Netflix quality of something that's just boring enough, that's just teasing you to be interesting. The show where the first 5 minutes of every episode and the last 5 minutes of every episode are the only things that matter.
Mhm.
That kind of apathy and that kind of just acceptance of, well, I gotta buy this, I just have to add this streaming service to the rotation, becomes kind of invasive. And this is why I said at the top, like it's really hard to explain to people the the world we used to live in without this. Because I think at the end of the day, the worst thing that the streamers have done is they've made movies and TV feel like a completely taken for granted passive experience. And the kind of cultural shift that has happened where for a majority of the population, and I go to the theater a lot, so I see this a lot, for a majority of the population, the idea that you would have to go to a theater and turn your phone off and watch the movie in silence is becoming less and less the norm. And the movies are seeing it too. And they're realizing that the streamers are really easy to gamify and mess with the algorithm. So they start making movies that have titles that are designed for search engine optimization. They have sound editing and cinematography choices that make them easier to play consistently over the course of multiple streaming services. They cut down on those artistic choices like the John Wick subtitles because they understand the consequence of that on trying to stream it on multiple platforms in multiple languages. It becomes this broad reaching kind of virus where if you want to have a real conversation with people about the importance of movies as an art form, about independent movies that have largely been erased in the budgeting streaming ecosystem, about accessibility to media, about preservation of media, there's a lot of people now that just don't understand fundamentally why we should care about movies as an art form. And I think a large portion of that is because of Netflix.
I don't know if it's like entirely because of Netflix, because I feel like you're
Not
also
entirely, but a large
yeah.
portion of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like you're also seeing a lot of this like creep into other things. Like I think I sent it to you because it just fucking blew my mind trying to understand it. Where a short came up on my feed, and you and I both like the show White Collar. That was a good show.
Yeah, that was a fun show. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, I think I sent this to you. Where a short came up on my feed, and it was one of Neil's, like, breaking into a bank or, like, robbing a bank to prove that he could do it, to, like, get on their security or some shit like that. It was some scam to get on the bank security by proving how easy it was to rob them. And so it's a short of that clip cut up to make it fit into the fucking 60-second window with like shitty wipes, and there's a filter over it to get around the copyright thing. But like all of that I could forgive it because fuck it, it's piracy at this point. That's fine. If not for the fact that it added a shitty AI narration voice over it,
Yeah.
like pre good AI voices, if you know what I'm talking about, like shitty AI voice over it that just described what the fuck he was doing. And I'm sitting here like, what is going? I was just that was when I truly became old, Steve. So I'm just sitting there watching, like, why are we doing this?
It's legitimately it's because clip farming is a big thing. It's because you can farm clips, post them on social media, rack up a bunch of monetized money, and then run away with it. Like, it's so common. It's all over Twitter. It's all over TikTok. It's all over YouTube. And it's another one of those things where, like, the style of how that's done, the way that you want to capture someone's attention in a really short form like that, these are all things that are invading things like the Netflix models in the movies. And I mean, Mia Hawke, Ethan Hawke's daughter, who's also her own actress and is really good, did an interview like a couple years ago now, maybe less, where she said that when she takes meetings with producers and casting agents and stuff, they started casting people based on how many social media followers they had. It didn't matter if they were good or not, because the influencer side of it, the fact that you could post TikToks, the fact that you were big on Instagram, these are the kinds of values that shift. And again, this is not all Netflix's fault, but when you go back to that original premise of Netflix is a tech company, Amazon is a tech company, all of these things are being done from the perspective of how can a tech company build the most amount of engagement, and how can we sneak in these devices or these tools or these techniques of farming people's attention into the products we sell, whether that's a video game, whether that's a YouTube video, whether that's a post, or whether that's a movie. And that kind of sinister prevalence in everything we watch now becomes really, really problematic, and makes movies worse in the long run. I mean, Disney just announced this past week that they were going to start putting vertically integrated videos on Disney Plus. So I guess you could watch TikToks on your TV. When Oppenheimer was coming out a couple of years ago, which is a great movie, one of my favorite movies of the decade, to be honest with you, they, I don't know if this was a Nolan thing or his agent or who agreed to this, but movie trailers play on TikTok and Reels as ads all the time. And the Oppenheimer one, without fail, every single time would open with a 5-second warning saying, hey, switch the orientation of your phone so you can see the frame like it's supposed to be seen.
That's real sweet of Christopher Nolan to think that people give a fuck. I really liked the meme that was going on for a while. I think it was with Oppenheimer. It was with one of his movies where it's like watching so and so as Christopher Nolan intended, and people were trying to get it on like smaller and smaller screens. I
saw one like that where it was like a guy watching it on a Nokia phone.
Yeah. That was a good meme.
But like Nolan can definitely be a little bit much, and I think he went way over the line during COVID trying to get people to go see Tenet. I think a lot of what he was saying was kind of bullshit, but to a certain extent, you kind of have to respect just how over the line he goes to protect the cinematic experience and film as a medium, like film stock as opposed to digital. Because if he wasn't doing it, and he
No, I
wasn't
am.
delivering movies that are that are under budget and on time, these things would just go away. Like Kodak would not continue to exist if they weren't just constantly trying to work with Christopher Nolan to make IMAX films on film, right? Like,
Hmm.
and it's one of those things where because the tech companies are becoming so prevalent in these things, we always say like it's a nuance. You have a choice. You can work film, you can work digital. You don't have to go to a streamer, you don't have to go on cable. But over time you realize that that's just simply not true. The way the ecosystem has constantly been consumed by these big tech entities, the less and less that those options are even available to you to begin with. It was the same thing when we went from film to digital, that so many theaters had to switch out their projection systems for digital, and all the mom and pop movie theater chains that had staggered releases throughout the country that kept word of mouth for movies alive died because they weren't able to invest the kind of money it would take to set up a digital screen, and the only ones that could were the big chain Cinemarks and Regals and AMC's.
So really, it's all capitalism's fault yet again.
In a
Um,
way, in a way.
Marx failed to predict how insufferable I would become after reading it. Yeah, I don't know. It's such a wild like evolution, and it's weird to think about. Like, we just kind of lived through it, and like the changes went from this is exciting, this is cool, this is new, to man, what happened? And like none of it was divorced from everything. Everything was like these baby steps that kept evolving and evolving, and it does really take that. It's not that you can't say you couldn't see any of this coming. I remember people complaining about these different aspects when they were first being introduced, or like the possible implications of this, that, or the other. But it really did take like looking back, letting all these developments happen to really see just how fundamentally it shifted things, and how inarguably worse things got because of those shifts. Um,
Mhm.
so it is kind of wild, because it was like I remember people like, oh man, the streaming services just they're everywhere, and pretty soon this is all anyone's going to be making. I remember people replying with like the box office for whatever the latest like fucking Marvel movie was, and like cinemas are fine, kind of thing.
Yeah,
uh,
yeah,
I don't know. It's a wild change in just society.
yeah. And I mean, I've been saying this a lot over the last couple of years, especially, but I do really, really feel like we're at a point now where you just have to not comply in advance with any of this stuff, whether it's political stuff, whether it's tech stuff, whether it's artistic stuff. If someone's selling you a phone and says that the camera is better, why do you need a better camera? Just ask the question. Just ask the question of somebody and be like, why do I actually need this? It could be better. It could be more convenient, but why do I actually need this? Has anyone's lives gotten markedly better because we did away with the scourge of linearly programmed television? Like, was that a problem that we needed to fix? What exactly were we fixing by inventing streaming? But so like it in hindsight that makes sense, but like in the moment, that sort of skepticism I feel like becomes more and more warranted as the technologies you deal with become more and more predatory. Like just because someone says that this new technological streaming AI platform thing is out there, you don't have to just accept that it's a positive thing. You can treat it with the level of skepticism that that should justify its use, that it shouldn't just be there with the expectation that we're going to use it.
I think that's like AI is the thing that's getting the hardest push from these companies, but also, at least as far as I can remember, the most pushback from people.
For
Um,
sure, yeah.
like everyone, like there's definitely the AI bros and stuff still, but like the this is the first time in a long time that that kind of support has felt like on the fringes, and that just generally more people just fucking hate the like, not just the integration, but just the super hard push for AI from these companies. But that's like an entirely different topic. I think we're pretty good on this. I think we talked about a lot of stuff. We've gotten pretty good amount of time into past the normal mark for our episode. So I think we're gonna just go ahead and wrap things up there. Woo! Yep. Then Geeky Gentlemen solved another societal ill in an hour-long podcast. How do they do it, man? They're so good.
Making the world better, one 90-minute pod at a time.
Right. All right. Well, everyone, thanks so much for watching. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
And I am very much in this episode, the Luddite.
Yeah. And we are your Geeky Gentlemen, and we will be discussing things.